Hello everyone, it's Shannon here for Waffle Flower Crafts. In today's video, I'm going to be doing some partial die cutting to make a really fun winter card. And we're going to be using these Waffle Flower products today. First up is the new Warm Hand stamp set. It's a layering stamp set that creates two very beautiful Swedish mittens. I'll also be using the Cold Hand stamp set, the Warm Hands matching dies, the Stitched Hearts, which is a beautiful little die set, and then the Patched Layers die to add a detail to my card. First up, I'm going to stamp the mittens from the Warm Hand stamp set. I've just got a scrap piece of 110-pound white cardstock here, and I'm going to stamp all three layers. There's 3 layers to these mittens, and they're very clearly outlined or organized on the acetate that the stamps come with, so it's very easy to see which layer goes to which mitten. I'm going to start my first layer with the Piece of Mine dye ink. It's one of my favorite colors by Waffle Flower. It's a nice cool green. And then I'm going to ink it a couple times because it is a darker color and this is more of a solid stamp, so just going to ink it up and stamp it a couple times just so it's nice and the ink is all nice and solid on the image. And this is the 3rd time, so once I'm done stamping that, I'm going to grab the second layer for the mittens. Just going to position them there. Really easy to position these. And then I will ink them up in the New Fish in Pond. It's a really pretty aqua color. And then stamp these again a couple of times, again just to make sure that I got good coverage and a nice dark shade. Okay, so now that I've stamped the second layer, I only have one more layer to do. It's the 3rd and final layer. Just positioning them there, and then I will ink up this last layer in a pink. It's called Tickled Pink. It's a really pretty warm pink. I really like these 3 shades together. I think it's really nice for like a winter card, could be a Christmas card even, as just a little bit untraditional colors. Okay, so that's all done. I'm going to stamp it one more time because I already got it in my MISTI here, and finish it up. Okay, so all those 2 mittens are finished and all the layers are done. Now I'm going to just hold up to the camera so you can see. I really love this stamp set. I love the layers. I just love layering stamp sets, and I really love that this stamp set intentionally leaves some parts of the mittens white, or at least the color of your paper that you're stamping on. And I just like that because it's almost like a 4th color with the mittens. So I'm using the matching dies now, and I'm just die cutting the mittens out. Nothing fancy here. And now I'm going to start to fold my paper. So this is just an A2 110-pound white cardstock card base. I'm going to score it right at 4 1/4, so right in the middle. And this is an A2 side folding card base. And now I'm going to flip it over and score one of the sides at 2 1/8, which is halfway, the middle point of one of the panels, or one of the sides. And I'm just going to score it right on through. I could have made a line because I am going to do partial die cutting right at that point, and I could have sketched a line with my ruler, but I feel like it's less hassle just to score. You're going to score eventually anyway, so I went ahead and scored. Now I'm going to fold it over and really crease down that score line right at the middle, so right at your typical A2 score line. I'm not going to fold over, however, that 2 1/8 line that I made, because I'm going to use that as a guide for my partial die cutting. And I don't want to score that now because then I'll have scored mittens, or creased mittens, because they're going to be a little bit scored, but the die cuts that I made earlier will go over it and hide that score line. So I'm going to start by just adding my detail first. I'm going to use the Patch Layers die here. Just going to center it on that front panel. Use some painter's tape to hold it down, and then I'll run it through my die cutting machine. So pretty simple. I found I like to do this first because then I had that border squared away, and then it was easier to do the positioning of my mittens. So I like to get that done first. And once I've done that panel, I'm going to go right to the other panel, right to the right here, and do the inside panel of the card. And when this is all folded, it'll look like almost like one continuous detail. It's just a nice little addition to this style of card. So I was just centering it here on the inside panel, and then I'll use some painter's tape here to hold it down. So as soon as I get this painter's tape down, I'm going to just run it through my die cutting machine. So this is just very basic die cutting, nothing different, nothing unique. So as soon as I'm done, I'll peel off the paint here, or peel off the painter's tape, and then I will start to figure out how I'm going to arrange my mittens for my partial die cut. And you can still see I still have that score line that I made at 2 1/8. I'm going to use that as a guide. That's my center point. I know I want this heart to be on the center but on the inside panel, and I'm just putting it here to kind of help me figure out how I need to position these mittens so that they cover up that heart when the card is folded closed. So I'm just kind of using these dies to help me figure this all out. I know I need to put the heart more towards the upper portion of the card. That way I can fit both mittens on the front and still partial cut them. So I figured it out here, so I'm going to use some painter's tape and kind of hold it down. A little tricky to do because I'm holding the other two dies in place. And then I'll remove that heart die in just a second here. Just trying to figure out if I want it more in the center. Nope, I'm going to leave it up there. So I'm going to remove the heart die and then put some painter's tape right over that that second mitten. So now I've got my mittens in place, and I still have that score line at 2 1/8, and that I'm going to hold it up to the camera here in just a second so you can see that score line. It's very faint, but you can see it right there. I am going to line up the top plate for my die cutting machine right at that line. So I'm going to line it right up with the edge of that line. That is where I'm going to stop die cutting because I don't want to cut any further, because then I'll have two mittens, just two white mittens, and I want them to be still attached to the card front. So when I fold this, they kind of pop up, and you'll see it here better once I'm done. So just ran it through my die cutting machine, and because I had that top plate stopping right there at that line, it didn't cut any further than that line. And now I'll hold it up to the camera so you can see. So they're only partially cut, they're not all the way cut, and they stop right at that score line. So now I'm ready to finally fold that over and really crease down that score line. So I'm just going to use my score tool and really kind of press down that that score line that I made at the folds, and then this pretty much the panel is done. I just have a couple more details to do. I do want to die cut that heart right now while I have this all kind of figured out. So you can see how nice and pops up. So I'm going to grab that stitched heart again, and I'm going to place it down at that center panel, the inside panel, and I'm going to kind of use that top panel to kind of help me make sure I get this lined up and it's still covered. So there we go, using that to help me, and that's nice and centered. So I'm just going to grab my painter's tape here, grab a couple pieces just to hold it in place. I don't want it scooting around on me while I run it through my die cutting machine, and then I will just run this through. And that's the last of my die cutting. So a lot of die cutting for this, but each one did a nice little detail. And this is going to be a really unique card, something different than your typical A2 cards. So I'm just going to peel off this painter's tape, and then you have a beautiful little stitched heart. You could stitch this, but I'm just going to add a piece of colored cardstock to the back, and you'll see this light pink through. So I'm just going to grab a piece of an A2 panel of pink cardstock. That this panel or this cardstock matches the pink ink that I use, the Tickled Pink ink, and I'm just going to adhere it to the back. I'm just going to use some liquid adhesive to do this. This is just Mod Podge adhesive in a fine tip application bottle, and I'm just spreading it all over the backside of the card, and then I will center my panel here and then just adhere that down. And just in a few seconds here, you'll see why it is necessary for me to use liquid adhesive. I just can't get it on one go, so I am recentering it here and sticking it down, and I find I can do that much better with liquid adhesive than I'm able to do that with a tape runner. Okay, so I've got that panel down. You can see a nice little pink behind that stitched heart. Really pretty. And when I close, you can't see the heart, which I think is super cool. A little nice effect. Okay, so now I just have some final stamping and adhering to do. So I'm going to grab that aqua color. It is called New Fish and Pond, and the little snowflake from the Cold Hand stamp set. Mount it here on a tiny little acrylic block, and then I'm just going to stamp this, repeat stamp this all over the center panel and the front panel, just to add a nice little detail, almost like creating my own little pattern paper. A little bit more interest. And again, and I'm laying the card front so I can stamp even that folded section. I can get that stamped too. So it's all over. It's very well designed. It just really has a nice pattern. So when you open the card, you see the details all over. Okay, so now that I've got all the stamping done, I can now adhere my mittens that I die cut and stamped earlier. Just going to use some more of the liquid adhesive here and just stick those down, just center them right over the partially die cut mitten, and we'll be done with those. And the nice thing about this is this hides the score line that goes right over the mittens that we made at the very beginning, so you wouldn't even know it's there at this point. And again, liquid adhesive is my friend. I had to reposition that mitten, that top mitten there. So both my mittens are down now. Now I'm ready to stamp the sentiment, and I'm almost done here. So I'm going to use the sentiment from the Cold Hand stamp set. It's a really sweet little sentiment. It says, cold hands, warm heart. So I'm going to pull off the cold hands part and have that stamp that on the front of my card, and the warm hands I'll stamp right in the center of that stitched heart. I'm sorry, warm heart sentiment. I'll put that right in the stitched heart. So I'm positioning both my sentiments here, and then I'll fold over Misty. I'm using my Misty just because sentiments are typically the last thing I do, and I've done all this work so far. I really don't want to mess up on the sentiment. So the Misty will be kind of a little insurance that I won't mess it up. I'm going to be using the Tickled Pink for the inside sentiment and Peace of Mind for the outside. And again, I will stamp this a couple times just to make sure they're just as intense as the mittens, because I did stamp the mittens a couple of times, so I just want to make sure that the ink is just intense. So I'll stamp these. I'm going to stamp Tickled Pink twice, and then the Cold Hands, which is in Peace of Mind, 3 times, just to make sure it's nice and as intense of a color as the mittens are. And that is done. So now the fun part, we get to kind of fold it and play with it and see how it the mittens work, and just make sure that they cover up. Just going to pop that back out again. Got a little stuck there when I glued the mitten on top. And there you go. You can see how the mittens the partial die cutting has the mittens hanging off the edge. But we did a good job of positioning that heart so it's behind that mitten, and you can't see it until you open up the card all the way. So really cool. A fun take on a different kind of, on your A2 cards, just a different way to kind of make an A2 card. And I did make 2. So I hope you guys enjoyed my video today. If you have any questions on the products I use, please visit waffleflower.com, and you can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook for more creative ideas. Thanks for watching.